Hi there. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Tinnitist TV. Today, I'm talking to Don Pyle. He's probably best known as the drummer in Shadowy Man on a Shadowy Planet, aka the instrumental surf band behind the twangy Kids in the Hall theme song. But this Toronto native and old school punk's resume also includes stints with the bands Crash Kills 5, Phono-Comb, and King Cobb Steelie, along with countless credits as a producer, engineer, and film and TV scorer. Aside from music, he's also had a lifelong love affair with photography, publishing 2 books, 2011's Trouble in the Camera Club and 2022's Shot in a Mirror. This year, he ups the ante with his 3rd book, Rough Description, Love Letters and Ghost Stories from a Life in Music, a fantastic memoirish collection of essays about his career, life, bandmates, friends, adventures, hardships, and losses. It is also one of the best music books of 2026, hands down. Back in the spring, Don zoomed in from Toronto to talk about hating most drummers, getting along with Johnny Ramone, the glory days of Toronto punk, the greatness of Dallas Good, and much more. Enjoy. The first place we should start is I want to give you compliments on this book because, in all honesty, I only knew a couple of things about you. I knew of you from Shadowy Man and Phono-Comb, of course. And I knew that you were a barber for some reason because I had talked to some other
Yeah,
musicians recently who were barbers and your name came up. It seems to be a slightly common job amongst
yeah,
musicians. But
definitely.
that was all I knew about you sort of going into reading Rough Description. And I didn't know what to expect, but I really, really was sincerely pleased and enjoyed the book. It's one of the better music memoirs that I've read, and I don't mean to sound so surprised by that it shouldn't have been, but
I'm surprised.
yeah, well, good work.
Well, thank you.
So, the first 2 books you did were basically photo based.
Yeah.
This one's obviously more of a written memoir. But if I've got that right, it was essentially inspired by some of your photographs, in particular the one of Wendy Coburn.
Yeah.
Could you kind of explain and expand on that so people kind of get an idea of what they're in for?
Well, with each of the books that I did talks like where I would show photos from the books and kind of talk about them. Like with the first book, Trouble in the Camera Club, um, a lot of that was kind of talking about details that I was seeing in photos as I was retouching them because it was such a laborious process to retouch dust and adjust exposure and stuff from photos that I took when I was a teenager. Um, but in the second book, which is called Shot in a Mirror, it's mostly portraits.
Right.
And I did a little bit of text in it, a little bit of writing. Um, but uh, the photos, I wanted them to kind of like just sort of be on their own, not kind of give context for who everybody was. And part of that was because, there's how I know them, like how do I know Patty Schmidt or how do I know Martin Sorendegi, so it would be like as a host, as a singer in a band and stuff like that. And I felt like those things were like too narrow without kind of like writing a longer kind of like context thing. So I kind of left it at just kind of like 2 longer pieces and written pieces that described what was going on in the picture and kind of like some story about the background. But when I did talks about them, I showed almost all the pictures in the book, and I just talked about what my feelings were about the picture, about the person, the circumstances that happened. With the Wendy Coburn picture in particular, there was such a intense story that went along with it
Mm-hmm.
because of this art piece that she did that caused her to have surveillance on her from the police and who knows who else. And not long after that started happening, she took her own life. So it kind of like is an intensely emotional thing. So it really kind of hit home with me, something that I've really felt over years with looking at photographs about the changing meaning of a photograph. Like when you look at it at different times, like how different it feels. Like I look at the picture of Wendy Coburn, the week after I took it, and it's like, oh, that's so beautiful. Is a nice city skyline, and I know it's Wendy, even though her back is to the camera. But then when you see it after she's chosen to end her life, it's so hard not to read things into it. So it kind of started with the Wendy Coburn piece where I wrote what I was, a lot of what I was saying when I was doing talks about the photos. And part of that was to remember it for myself because, with Shot in a Mirror, I maybe did like 10 of those things. And lots of times I would remember something different. And so it would change every night. It would be sort of a little more freeform. Um, but so that kind of started it. And then a couple of particular people who were close to me, Dallas Good and specifically, and Steve Albini, um, the two of them, I wrote things about them like after they died. And, you're in this kind of really intense emotional state where you're reflecting on your whole life with them, your whole time with them, anything you did. And again, I wrote those things down kind of for myself. Um, I had a lot of feedback from Trouble in the Camel Club, particularly, which is like half photos and has a lot of writing in it about how much people appreciated the writing that was in those. And then when I was doing the photo talks, I also had like really great feedback from people. So I knew that people like really wanted to hear stories about some of the pictures kind of in the same way that I do when I read lots of biographies. I just read a lot in general. I like history. I like music history. I love knowing details about, how different things happened. Like something I read recently was that Jerome, the maraca player with Bo Diddley, is the inventor of a tremolo unit, which like I don't know if that's true or not, but I read that.
That's a great
But I
story.
love
I
that
wasn't
shit.
there.
I love sort of the connecting the dots of various things. So it kind of inspired me to do a longer form book that was like just writing, but sort of launching off from a photograph for each one. So that would be the impetus to get me talking, and then I just kind of put down whatever I was feeling, whatever I was talking about. But I am pretty aware that, like, when I gave the thing the subtitle of Love Letters and Ghost
Ghost
Stories,
stories.
um, that it kind of was that because, like, some of the chapters, like, of my big brother,
Mm-hmm.
Albert, for Boys Without Fathers, it's like nobody knows Albert, but he's someone who is really, really important to me,
Mm-hmm.
and kind of part of the fabric of who made me who I am. And I think that just my life with him made for kind of like really interesting story.
I have to agree. I mean, one of the things that I loved about the book is I think a lot of people will come to it for the music side of it, obviously. But then you get these chapters about your mom or Albert or
Yeah,
um, the car accident you were in when you were a kid, or you going to hairdressing school,
yeah.
and they're funny, they're moving, they're I don't know, it's just it's just a really well written book. Did you are you someone who's kept a journal, or do you just really have a great memory?
No, I really wish I had it. It's something that
Sure.
I tell that I say to a lot of people. There were so many things like when you get beyond a certain age where kind of learn something and you think like, oh yeah, I wish I had done that because
Yeah, you and me
so
both.
many people I know or books that I've read, people talk about, that they kept a journal and that they could refer to it. And I guess sort of my journals were quite often other people who had those same experiences with me. So I would talk to them about it, like,
I wanted to
Brian from
ask,
Shadowy
yeah.
Man or my sister or whoever, where we would
Hmm.
talk about things. And I kind of like hear something from their side that was either very different or sometimes exactly the same, but with just like particular details that really stuck out for them. So I didn't keep a journal, and I kind of encourage everybody to do that at some point. I used to write down on a calendar, like the calendar that was on the wall. I would write something in the square quite often of like just like some short thing that I did that day. And in some stupid purge at some point, I threw all my old calendars away, before I ever knew that they would be of some use. But, even I wish I'd kept them to know, like, oh, how many times did I see Echo and the Bunnymen? Where did I see them? That kind of stuff.
Right, and I'm guessing that you don't have a big collection of memorabilia. You haven't saved every concert ticket from everything you went to or anything like that.
Oh my God, I have.
Oh,
Like,
okay.
that's what, that's kind of, I think, like the book is in a way, it's sort of like, journalism.
Hmm.
Because I think I write from a perspective that's pretty plain writing. Uh, it's sort of like straightforward describing things that happen, and of course, there's like emotional content, emotional reactions, emotional feelings, and other observations. But something like I read Nico Case's autobiography after I'd finished mine, and it was all handed in, and I was really struck by like what a different book it was from what I wrote. First of all, because hers, I think, is more of like a little bit of an autobiography. And I felt like I sort of circumvented that because, I'm not someone who most people know or care who I am. So a biography about me is not necessarily interesting, but these various things that I kind of focused on to write about, I think a lot of those things are pretty interesting. So Nico writes from a place that is very lyrical. It's very there's a lot of adjectives, and it's really descriptive about kind of everything. Like the color of the grass, the feeling of the sky, and what the wind was like that day. And I felt like what I was writing was a little bit sort of more journalism. Um, I
It's very
forget what your question was, but
conversational.
yeah.
Reading it feels like we're sitting down together and you're telling me stories. It has that. It almost sounds, or it almost reads as if it was dictated, like you sat there, you
Yeah,
know, just telling the stories into a recorder.
yeah, well, definitely wasn't done like that. A lot of labor
Yeah, I
in
bet.
writing
Were
that.
some of those personal chapters difficult to write? Because the one about Dallas, I have to tell you, that chapter on Dallas is incredibly moving and beautifully written. You know.
Yeah, thank you. I definitely had some tears here and there writing about people. It was really the chapter about Dallas, the chapter about my mother, the chapter about Reed Diamond, those
Hmm.
chapters. Because when you're doing this, like you're conjuring the person, when you're writing about them, they're very present with you. And some of that is like, you're crying because you're laughing, or it's good
Yeah,
feelings, and
sure.
other times it's because it's really difficult things, like some of the stuff with my mother. There was a lot of difficult stuff. And when I was writing about her, there were a lot of days where I was feeling, it was winter too, where I was like, really feeling like, some dark days when I was writing about her, even though there was so much, good in it and light in it, that yeah, it was difficult to write some of the things. And
Do you
there were
feel a little
definitely times
lighter
where I
now
was
that they're
asking
out?
myself, like, why am I doing this? Why, why am I writing about my mother? That was a challenging one to kind of like think about and kind of like
Right.
answer for myself.
And did you get those answers? Do you feel a little
Well,
lighter, now that this is all out and on the page?
no, I mean, I don't feel like there's any kind of like catharsis in like
Hmm.
writing about that stuff. I think some ways it's kind of like it makes some of the difficult things more present and kind of like keeps them in your life. When I write about her partner, he's someone who I never want to, think about ever again, but so writing about him, that was difficult. And and I know that there's a bit of a sort of a paradox in writing because I'm choosing exactly what to write about. I'm choosing what to expose,
Hmm.
but at the same time, I kind of feel like it's been I don't know if exercise is the right word, but something that I've like really tried to do over, with passing year of being more open and just like being kind of more kind of truthful about things that are going on in my life or my experience and kind of like wearing my emotions sort of more on the surface. And that comes from all kinds of things, like particularly people that you care about dying, which I think is, unfortunately kind of a subtext. And well, I don't know if it's unfortunately, but it is a bit of a subtext in this book because there are a lot of, as other people have pointed out to me, there's a lot of dead people in this book. But,
Well, we're
you
at
know,
that age.
yeah. Oh my
Yeah.
God. Just yesterday I saw on Facebook that the guy who booked King Cobb Steelie, the band I was in, just died. And, another friend is kind of on his deathbed, and my in-laws have both had strokes. So these things are, really present all the time. And that sort of cliche of as you get older, the time goes faster, where it really fucking feels like it's going fast. And so, I sometimes feel a compulsion to kind of like just like do as much sort of like work or creative work or recording of stuff, documenting things as much as I can.
Hmm.
And I think the writing sort of relates to um, I've definitely been, I don't know if obsessive is the word, but like I take a lot of great pleasure, particularly in the past. Now I'm more at sort of like purging stage, but the Trouble in the Camel Club book, I was so glad to be able to like, I can make use of all of this stuff that I've saved forever. Like,
Right.
a guitar pick I got from Johnny Ramone 50 years ago, or flyers from shows and ticket stubs and just like an ad for something, a listing, like in I some of the stuff that I come across that I've saved, like 10 different pieces of newspaper that I've torn out of the paper for the Man Who Fell to Earth movie screening. And so, it's like just the things that obsessed me. I kind of like collected everything. And that was also pre-internet too, where sometimes those things are they're rare. It's hard to see a picture of someone you care about or that you're interested in. There's definitely no place to see video, or
Mm.
film of somebody unless, you're going to, a movie about Jimi Hendrix or the Sex Pistols or something like that. There, so it was kind of like creating my own archive, and thankfully, I've had a um, that's come in useful, come in handy for me. This kind
Good.
of like
Fact
obsessively
check.
collecting stuff, and it's also helped cure me of it as well.
Well, I hope you're taking a picture of everything before you throw it away, because it sounds to me like that's another book, or at least a
Oh,
website, you know?
you've been watching me. I do. Yes, I do take a lot of pictures of things before I throw them away.
It makes perfect sense to me. Um, the book also feels to me one of those love letters is it's a love letter to that heyday of Toronto punk rock
Yeah,
in the mid to late '70s. I wore my last pogo shirt
yeah, I
for
saw
you
you
in
were wearing
honor
that.
of that. um, were you able at that time in that moment to appreciate how special and unique and I don't know temporary that whole scene was back then, or is that something that you've only been able to appreciate with the perspective of age.
Like, do you mean sort of like original punk rock scene, or kind of like when
Yeah.
I was like starting to playing bands?
Well, either really, because I
Well,
think
I
they kind
guess
of
there's
one grew out of the
possibility.
other, right? You know.
Well, yeah, I mean, the beginning of, punk rock and the earliest days of that, I mean, yeah, to me it was like totally special. And I was like really aware that it was like something amazing happening.
Mm.
But I also am pretty aware that that was my experience because of my age,
Right.
like this is the age where I am entering into going to clubs, going to see bands, really kind of seeing live music. I'd always been really obsessed with music and records and, reading magazines about music and books, just like, from the youngest age. Um, so the original punk rock wave, it definitely felt like it was something amazing happening, even though it was like a totally small scale thing.
Mm-hmm.
That was definitely part of the appeal of it because, the first shows that I'd have gone to, like, seeing the Beach Boys or BTO at the summer
Right.
fair, in the stadium at the summer
Yeah.
fair. So to go from that to being in a club where you're like, you know, literally like a foot away, 2 feet away from the performer, that was like super exciting to me. Um, so um, I think that there are different periods through time where I really can like recognize now like when there is something happening that is a golden moment where there's
Mm-hmm.
something really amazing happening here, and if it's kind of more recent in the last 20 years or so, I'm aware sometimes that the people who are participating in this, they don't know it
Right.
because they're younger and they haven't had the perspective of looking back on it. But there are times like when like the hidden cameras were beginning, and
Right.
Will Monroe, artist in Toronto, who was doing a club here called Vaseline, there was this what I felt like was this golden moment because it brought together a community of all these sort of disparate types that were oddballs or misfits in some way and kind of outsiders in their sort of demographic, but it sort of created this meeting place for them, and it was like wonderful. And then, of course, those things can only last you know a few years, a couple of years. Just like the punk rock, the first thing to me, the ideal of it was
Mm-hmm.
over in a couple of years, and it
Right.
kind of morphed into something else. My own experience in kind of like my most active, busy, um, music life was probably the years that I was in Shadowy Men, and so that was like many years long, and I that felt like it was a pretty amazing time for me. And it was only in retrospect that you realize, like, oh, this was not just an amazing time for me because of what I was experiencing. It was a pretty dynamic time for a lot of people because of various circumstances, just like the affordability of an apartment.
Right.
Those things are so huge in connection to people's ability to make art, make music, make anything creative, how they can afford to live. So, we tour and accommodation was cheap, gas was affordable, van rentals were affordable.
Right.
And, we
You could
could
do
come
things.
home with a few
Yeah.
bucks where, I can't tell you how many times I've heard young artists now that I talk to, I just got back from a tour of the UK and I'm about to go out on, this is like exactly what someone just told me, that I just got back from a tour of Europe, um, and am about to go out on an American tour, and I'm kind of freaked out about it because we lost 20,000 on that tour and we're about to lose 10,000 on this tour. And I don't know how I'm going to do that.
Yeah,
So
and I mean
people
it's
are,
it, and you look at it though from the other perspective, and I mean when we were going to concerts as kids, you probably had the same experience as I did, where it was a ticket was 250, three
Yeah,
fifty, 450, and now it's $400, $500. I mean, even to go
yeah,
see a half decent touring band in a bar, you're probably paying somewhere between 75 and $100. So it's like, on both ends, people are
yeah,
getting ripped off, and all that money's going somewhere
yeah,
in the to the middlemen.
yeah. Well, that's it. Kind of like everything else in the world, and
Yeah.
the middlemen have figured out how to siphon it off before it
Mhm.
gets to the other ends of the
Exactly.
of the pool.
But in this scene, it almost feels like you're kind of to think of speaking of middlemen. You kind of are. It seems like this little Zelig like central figure in this scene in terms of the coincidences of your life, like going to getting that pen pal from Calgary that then
Yeah.
takes you out to Calgary where you meet Reed and Brian, and then they come to Toronto, and Bruce McCullough follows them, and you seem to be kind of the matchmaker for a lot of these things.
Well,
Right place, right time.
it's funny because I have been aware that I have been that role with other people,
Hmm.
where I've, kind of connected people that I thought you should meet and you should meet, and you're looking to meet. And I hear what you're saying, and I kind of feel like everybody has these experiences. We all do.
Hmm.
And it's just, like I did things that were public so people see it more and kind of like, maybe kind of evaluate it in a different way. But I think every single person has those those connecting points and, places in their life where they cross over with each other and make things happen
Fair enough. I
if
think
they
it's
want
also
to, you
reflective of
know.
the how small the scene really probably was, relatively speaking, at that point. I mean, because the names that come up in your book are just, you go, oh, okay, know him, know him, know him, know. There's a lot
Yeah,
of people who went on to do other things, and
yeah,
it's not like you're necessarily just picking and choosing those people. Those were the people who were involved in that relatively small scene at the time.
yeah.
Yeah. One of the things I find so refreshing about this book is your attitude toward your own career and your music and your drumming and your talents. You're not very precious about any of this stuff. Is that is that again an attitude that you've always had towards your own life and career, or is that something that again has come with perspective?
Well, I think kind of always because, it's like I've never been in a band that's been like, really popular.
Hmm.
And I've been fortunate to be able to do a lot of things. And I'm also aware that many of the things that do excite me and that I've pursued, photography, production, music production, haircutting, playing drums, any of those things, I just had too many interests. So it's like you can only spend like so much time on, practicing your drums if you're trying to learn how to edit video or,
Right,
color correct and
right, right.
and fucking retouch photos for a book and stuff like that. So I'm really aware that like I haven't like singularly dedicated my life to one thing. And sometimes I think like I saw the Dirty Three the other night and I was just like
Mm,
transfixed by the drummer, Jim White. He's
hmm.
incredible. He blows my mind. And so I watch him and I just think like, oh my God, like if I had have just like practiced drums, it's like what he's doing is like inhuman to me. Uh,
Right.
and I will, pretty accepting of that. I will never ever reach that stage because do I think like, yes, I want to like, practice drum 5 hours a day? No, I think more like, oh, fuck, I can't even make time. I haven't made time to practice piano, which I really do want to do.
Hmm.
So it's just too many things.
That's the price
So
of being a jack of all trades and a master of none.
well, yeah, yeah. I mean,
Exactly.
there is some truth to that
Yeah,
kind of way of describing it.
yeah. I mean, my drumming experience, because I'm a drummer as well, but was listening to Tony Williams on an old Miles Davis live album,
Yeah,
Four and More, and he goes into those solos, and he's 17 at this point. Which, think about that, you're playing with
Yeah.
Miles Davis as a teenager,
Yeah.
and he goes into those solos that just make you want to go, why even bother? I should
Yeah.
just burn the drums, throw away the sticks, and give up right now.
Well, I saw a
Um,
clip just a few days ago of Ian Pace, who I write about in one
right.
of the chapters in the book from Deep Purple.
Hmm.
Because Deep Purple are out on tour now,
Yep.
and I read that he was the only person who's been in the band, been in every version of the band.
Yep.
And so I watched his video clip, and he's still incredible, and
Hmm.
he's 77 years old.
And I
Like,
think
so
he
I
had a
was like,
stroke last year or something. So he's had,
like that's nuts.
yeah. Well, and as a drummer, it's interesting reading the book. You seem to dislike most drummers.
Well, I mean, don't you think when
Oh,
I
definitely.
think
We're in agreement on that. Yeah.
there's something about watching a band. I don't know. Like, I say that it's no coincidence. I think that I was the singer or that I was the drummer, and those are the two things in a band that I find most annoying. But I, uh, I don't know. I kind of feel like that most people do,
Hmm.
and it's definitely something that you kind of tune into when you are a drummer yourself. Like,
Hmm.
oh God, I wish that person would just lay off the cymbals. Like it's just like too much of that. But I'm totally aware that I did the same thing. Like, playing the ride cymbal, with the side of the stick to make it just like shh,
Yeah.
make this wash to fill space and um, kind of make it sound like you're playing more than you're doing. There's something. It's Cymbals are like an adrenaline thing. They kind of like just
Right.
constant blasts of adrenaline. But like anything, when all the hits are coming at a high level, it just
Mhm.
sort of ends up being a plateau, and you're just kind of like,
Right.
oh, please lay off that.
Yeah.
So
I mean, I think everyone would expect you to list Nick Knox and Tommy Ramone as influences,
yeah,
but I like that you had Woody in there and Billy Fika or Fika, I don't know how it's
yeah,
pronounced, from television, and Paul Thompson from Roxy.
yeah,
Ainsley Dunbar was kind of a surprise, kind of a ringer. I wouldn't have expected
yeah.
to have you in there. I would have thought you'd be a Charlie Watts guy.
I like Charlie Watts,
Uh-huh.
but to me, he's like, I think he's great. He's
Mhm.
perfect for the band he's in, and it's always surprising to me when I see him doing his jazz thing because
Mm.
it's like, oh, you're a very different drummer than you are with the Rolling Stones. So it
Mhm.
kind of tunes me into the simplicity of what he does, and I love that. I love how minimal he is. Like he's someone who I think is so thoughtful about what he's playing because he can play
Mhm.
far beyond what he
Right.
plays, but he doesn't.
Right. And he's got that. It's got that swing, even when he's just playing a 4/4 rock beat, it's got
Yeah.
that kind of a groove. I think the same is true of Phil Rudd from AC/DC. No matter what you think of the band, he's just that perfect groove. He could have
Uh-huh.
been playing on all those old Motown songs, with that technique he's got, that style,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's like the perfect person for that thing.
Right. Yeah. You take him, you put him in
That
Rush, it doesn't work. Or you
yeah,
take Neil
totally.
Peart, you
It's
put
like
him in AC/DC, it doesn't work. Right. Yeah.
yeah, like and AC/DC, I love that it's like fucking components, it's building blocks. It's like a
Yeah.
block, a block, a block.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. But that was kind of, I think, true of what you guys were doing in some sense too, right?
Um, like what part? What do you mean?
Well, I mean, just you each had your very specific roles, I think, and it was trying to make something that was greater than the sum of its parts with
Yeah,
a lot of minimalism.
yeah. Yeah, it's hard for me to kind of like really know like how some of when you say our stuff, I'm assuming you're talking like Shadowy Men.
Shadowy, yeah,
That
very.
uh, I think kind of like retrospectively, like when we started playing again with Dallas, like learning the songs, because I played in different bands before and since then. But when I learned some of those things, it's like, oh my God, everything's really fast, and there are a lot of changes. There's a lot of ideas crammed into a pretty short space, and I kind of feel like what we were doing was like constantly like creating a window for a different person to come forward. It's like, you know, you're here, you're at the front, you're at the front, you're at the front, and constantly shifting throughout a song so that we're all kind of playing sort of different roles in different seconds of a song. Sometimes, um, and if there's things are kind of like straightforward and blocky, and I think that I would attribute that more to my ability uh, than desire to kind of like play beyond that. Yeah.
I think it's interesting though because you came to the drums pretty late, right? You were in your 20s when you started.
Yeah, which like 23 years old, which I think
That's
like
really late. Yeah.
as totally late. Like,
Yeah.
but kind of with that I totally remember at the time thinking that I am like way too old to start playing an instrument. 23 years old, which I look back now and it's nothing.
Right. Yeah.
Uh,
You've been playing for 45 years now almost. Yeah, exactly.
but at the time, it felt like anybody I know who's playing, who's my age, has been playing since they were 12 or 14 or something like that. So compared to everybody else, I'm pretty old, but in the big scheme of things, I'm not that old, and I really draw from that still about anything that I think about doing.
Mm,
That I remind myself that I thought I was too old at this time,
right.
and one day in not too distant future, I will think that I'll look back on the age I am now
Right.
and think
These are the
like,
good old
oh,
days. Yeah.
you could have done that. Look at all the
Yeah.
time you had.
Yeah. But you also came at it though from an interesting place because at 23 you had this vast experience of loving music and being influenced by music and knowing music. I mean, most of the people who start playing when they are, 9 or 10 or whatever, they don't really
Yeah,
have all that listening, behind them and all that sort of wealth of knowledge about going into it and understanding, groove versus
yeah,
technique or having a good record collection that they can go, oh, that's a drummer I like, and I want to kind of steal bits and pieces from him.
yeah,
So you get to sort of, I think, start from a very different place of experience that's in some ways farther ahead than kids who just grow up on doing rudiments and stuff and not knowing what they're doing.
yeah. I mean, it's definitely a different approach, and I don't know
Mm-hmm.
if any one is the right one. I
Yeah.
heard an interview the other day with a musician who was talking about doing this improvisation with orchestras,
Mm.
and so he would give them a note, like we're going to start on this note and then go here.
Right.
And it kind of reminded me of some experiences that I've had in writing music for like orchestral instruments and playing with classically trained musicians, how they kind of like melted down, how it was like their brain was frying when you asked them to kind of like improvise
Right.
because
It's not on the page. They
that's
can't do
that's
it. Yeah.
not what
Yeah.
their role is. That's not how they're trained. So like,
Mm-hmm.
it's like they're masters at playing what's on the page, but
Yeah.
when you go off the page, they were, lost.
Right.
So
I also love that you, as old guy with back problems, kind of wag your finger and tell those kids to sit up straight when they're playing the drums. I love that.
oh my God, well, I don't know if you've ever had back problems.
Oh yes.
If you see drummers like,
Oh, I
I
know that.
totally,
Yeah.
yeah, that hunch. It's like, you explain to them, no, no, when you're doing that, you're putting pressure on your outer disc and it's going to bulge out and burst and sciatica,
Yeah.
lifetime of
Been there.
back problems.
Been there. This might seem like kind of a silly question, but in the book, you say, and I think you're very correct in describing yourself as being successful in the fact that you've had this ability to have this career as an artist, doing
Yeah,
a multitude of things, music, photography, writing, which most people don't get to do.
yeah.
What is what quality? What's the secret to your success in terms of because I mean, on the one hand, like I said, you're not precious about a lot of the things you've done, even though some of the things you have done are obviously precious things. But you also exhibit a lot of commitment and drive. I mean, you say you wanted to have your first single out by the time you were 18 years old, and you
Yeah,
seem to, whatever project it is you're involved in, you seem to really throw yourself into it in terms of, crafting costumes to go and play two
yeah.
songs on a stage somewhere. Or so. I mean, is it that kind of, I don't know, commitment and drive that have helped you have this life, or are there other qualities you think?
Um, hmm. Uh, well, I definitely am pretty like I don't know if even ambitious is the right word, but I like to do a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
And I uh yeah, honestly, I don't really know how to do that. Like sometimes it's like just like you just have to do it. It's like
Mm-hmm.
driven by the pure economics of um the financial constraints, of like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, like I'm going to write a book and that's going to take me more than a year. So how am I going to live for that year? So like, how am I going to survive for that year? And so, you have to kind of like be very careful about how you can do that because no one's paying me to write this book.
Right.
So you have to keep doing other work. I have to keep cutting hair and doing other things. So part of that drive is to just like get things done to
Mm-hmm.
to make them happen. And I think kind of from being in and out of bands and doing a lot of things on my own, kind of to the side, or not even to the side, just like doing things on my own.
Mm-hmm.
It's sometimes it adds up to too much, like,
Sure.
but you just kind of have to do it if you want to make that thing happen. Someone
Right.
actually said that to me recently, like, God, you're so another artist who is a painter, video artist, and writer said you're like so prolific. And I don't feel that way at all. I feel like, God, there's so many more things I want to do, and there's just not enough time. There's not enough hours in the day. And
I think they go
also,
hand in hand, right? Those. Like, if you thought
yeah,
you were prolific, you go, I've
yeah.
done enough.
But I also, appreciate the value of having time to go play in the garden or go to the beach, So
Right.
those things are important to me too. And I'm also aware, like I think I wrote about that in one chapter, but about how even those things you're still kind of like working. And I think that that's just the way that most creative people are because
Mm-hmm.
when I'm writing the book, I'm walking to the grocery store, I'm walking through the grocery store, and I'm kind of like absent-mindedly putting stuff in the cart because I'm kind of writing in my head or thinking about like what is it that I really want to say here, why am I saying this, why am I saying that,
Mm-hmm.
and how do these things connect. So just like going swimming where I'm like
Right.
I feel like so much of the book was written while I was swimming, in my head, where it was just like, okay, now I gotta put that
Right.
down on the screen.
All right, that makes sense. And I mean, in terms of your career, how much do you think was just sheer luck? I mean, you admit that, in most of the bands, or the first couple of bands anyway, that you started, you had no real agenda,
Yeah,
not even thinking, oh, maybe we'll play shows. It was just kind of what you would do, or no agenda beyond playing shows. And then it seems like a lot of times things just seem to happen around you where people would, entice you to go play a gig,
yeah,
it almost seems like a lot of things happened without any intention on your part.
yeah. I would agree with that, and I think that I am pretty aware that I have been very lucky in
Hmm.
circumstances that I've been involved in, because you never know. And something like Kids in the Hall, you never know that
Hmm.
that show is going to be so good and that you're not going to be embarrassed about it later.
Mm.
Because I've worked on other things that it's not that I'm embarrassed about them, but they just like haven't held up in the same way,
Sure.
or I don't look back on them as being, um, you know, gee, I sure am glad you know,
Yeah, I hear
people heard me do that theme song for Queer as Folk.
Uh-huh.
So, things happen that, and also I think people outside of me have a different perspective because it's like, you do 100 things and two of them rise to
Right.
the surface and the other 98 are unknown to people. It's something that I've been pretty aware of for a long time. Kind of like people sort of perceive your level of busyness or activity relative to how popular the things are that you're doing.
Right.
So it's like, I'm not doing anything if, sometimes people's perception is I'm not doing anything if I'm in a band that they never listen to or they never go see,
Hmm.
that kind of
Hmm.
stuff.
Yeah, and I guess the more stuff you do, as you said, the more stuff you do, the more likely you're going to have the thing that becomes a tall poppy every now and again.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, it's all relative.
But I
Uh,
also
mhm.
like to do a lot of things, and I know
Yeah,
that I have a tendency to not say no to a lot of things.
I think that's a secret to that. Again, talking about a secret to your success, as it were. That just saying yes to things, I think, is a lot of it, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I was pretty aware of this in Shadowy Men, like, kind of after the fact. At the time as well, but I don't think I put it in such clear terms to myself until afterwards, that with three of us, there was like one guy that was always saying no, one guy that was always saying maybe, and one guy that was always saying yes.
And you were the guy who
And
always said yes, right?
and I'm the guy that always
Yeah,
said yes.
yeah.
And in at the time, it might have been really frustrating because you want to do more things and you want to kind of like kind of run with every interesting sounding opportunity that you have.
Hmm.
But it's only sort of retrospectively that I
Right.
really appreciate the value of all those perspectives. That
Hmm.
I'm really glad there was someone who was a no person. um,
Oh yeah, so there were a few things you got vetoed or talked out of that
yeah,
yeah, good idea. Glad we didn't do that.
yeah. But at the same time, I think you're going to have a more adventurous life when
Hmm.
you say yes to things. I remember when the Sadies were doing that, recording that live in concert volume 1 album that they did
Hmm.
with all the guests. They had all these different people, and there was a show that was sort of a warm up night in Kitchener, the night couple nights before the the recording show at Lee's Palace in Toronto. And I was driving back to Toronto with John Spencer,
Hmm.
and he had done recording with a band Cold Cut,
Right.
electronic group, and I really dug the track that he did with them. So I asked him, like, how did that happen? How did you end up getting connected to Cold Cut? Uh, and he said, they asked me, and I have a policy of not saying no to anything.
Right.
I was
Yeah,
like,
I got the same. I got the same
wow.
answer interviewing William Shatner once, and I said, what's the secret?" And he goes, "I just say yes. People ask me to do stuff, and I say yes. You know,
Yeah.
It's
Well, I
simple as that. It's
definitely
very
am much better at saying no to stuff now, but
yeah. Well, sure. That
it's hard
time.
for me to say no when it's like something interesting
Mhm.
sounding.
Yeah. One of the things you raise in the book that I found very interesting is you talk about how back in the day when you were in Shadowy Men and you were touring and even just starting out, you had this sort of Canadian infrastructure that was beneficial to you in terms of college radio and much music
Yeah.
and brave new waves and a kind of and those It Came From Canada albums that sort of, I don't know, they were kind of a unifying, I think, and you can argue the pros and cons of a more monolithic culture, but
Yeah.
they seem to have provided a lot of opportunities for your band and bands like yourself. Um, do you think that, I mean, obviously it doesn't exist today. Do you think that if you were starting a band like Shadowy Men today, that you would have the same, I don't know, chance to get beyond, your neighborhood bar?
Well, I definitely think it's much tougher for anybody starting now for different
Hmm.
reasons, some of which we mentioned, just like the economics of what a rehearsal
Yeah,
space
yeah,
costs.
yeah.
I'm in a band now. What we pay for a rehearsal space is like insane, uh, um, compared to,
Yeah.
what I've had to pay in the past. But the other thing is just like the sheer glut, all of the tools to do these various things have become much more accessible and easier to use. And
Hmm.
so there's, a gazillion more bands and a gazillion more people putting out records. Um, you know, a friend made this documentary about Nash the Slash that's
Right.
kind of
Looking forward to
getting
that.
screened now, and
Yeah.
told me about applying to uh, um, South by Southwest Film Festival,
Hmm.
and that they said that they had 10,000 films submitted. It's
Wow.
like that's mind-boggling,
Yeah.
to me that so, of course you can't see them all. And I think bands are sort of the same way. It's like where there used to be 500 bands kind of following the same path back and forth across the country. Now there's 10,000 bands.
Hmm.
I think it's tougher. Of course, there's the democratic thing of the internet getting your stuff around, but there's just such a just too much information.
Yeah. Yeah. I
And
remember going
I
to
think,
South by Southwest in the 90s, maybe 97, 98, when they were, I don't know, I think 800 bands on the whole thing. And John Doe from X was doing one of those day show things, and he uh,
yeah,
debuted a song that was called Too Many Goddamn Bands.
yeah,
That was 30 years ago. Now it's, impossible.
yeah. Well,
It's just,
also when we started too, there were not really, too many instrumental bands around. There were,
mhm.
a few that influenced us or that we sort of thought of as peers because there's like five of them. And
Yeah,
now there's you know
yeah,
again thousands of bands, so we sort of stood out in the landscape of the time in a way that I think we would less now. And also when you're young, so much of what's happening is the social scene that we're in, and we were all
mm,
like, going to
yeah,
see lots of bands, and that's a huge part of your band kind of um, getting attention is that you're, in the same environment, that you're in the same uh, pool with
right.
other people who are like-minded.
Yeah, so well, the scene, yeah. I love talking about you mentioned seeing the Ramones every time they came to Toronto. I,
Yeah,
I love that Johnny was the Ramone you connected with.
yeah, I know. It's like I think about that, like both the first time that I saw the Ramones when I was like 14 years old.
Hmm.
Johnny was the one who was like most sociable at that time.
Yeah,
And then when we played with them in, what was it, 87 or something, like he was the most sociable. So it's,
I don't know. Maybe that says
you know,
something about you, Don.
it was all three of us. He was,
Okay.
he was just like, uh, each of them, I've told this story so many times, but I think each of them had their own kind of like challenges that they were dealing with. But,
Yeah.
you know, Dee, for example, the promoter, Gary Top, introduced me to him. Don, this is Dee Dee, this is Dee Dee. And he had a cigarette in his hand, and when he reached his hand out to shake my hand, the cigarette just like fell from his hand, and he looked in my eyes and said, "Do you have a Valium?" That was the very first thing he said to me.
Oh, there you
So,
go. Yeah.
it's like Johnny was at a different place. He was more kind of like,
Well, Johnny had his shit together.
yeah,
Simple as that,
he he kind of did more than them in the social way.
Hmm. Well, and the business way too, from what all the books say.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
totally.
So now you mentioned your current band, Long Branch. You
Yep,
guys just put out an album, I think last summer.
yep.
Um, how active are you with that? I mean, obviously, it's as you said, it's not so conducive anymore to being a live performing band.
Yeah, well, two of the people have, full-time jobs
Mm.
and um that are, kind of demand a lot of time from them. So it will always be it will never be a,
Full time touring
let's
kind of
go
in.
for it
Right, right, right.
kind of situation.
Okay.
So you have to kind of play within the known parameters of what's possible, and
Right.
we definitely have a lot of limitations on kind of like what we're able to do. But there's also other limitations that just come from circumstance that we're 50 to 60 something years old, and it's a
You're doing it
different
for different
demographic.
reasons.
You're
Yeah.
yeah, you're not a band that you're not in the same kind of like social thing where it's really important for you to, you
Hmm.
know, be a fan of or going to see bands,
Hmm.
all the time.
Do you
So
still go
anyway,
to some
we're
shows?
like,
Hmm.
sorry?
Do you still go to shows?
Oh my God, all the time. Yeah.
Okay.
Uh, yeah, I see a lot of bands. Yeah, so Long Branch are sort of like semi-active,
Hmm.
I wouldn't say semi-active. We rehearse every week.
Okay.
But Lisa, for example, is a visual artist. She teaches at college here and or university, and she makes art. So there'll be like a month where Lisa can't do something because she's
Right.
um, has an exhibition in Newfoundland or something like that. So
Right. And the
um,
drummer's working on this
you
book
know.
forever, and
Well, that one didn't really interfere with things. Like where it's interfering is now because I'm going to go out and do,
right.
some readings and talks and stuff like that. So that's going to keep, my weekends occupied for about, 2 months this summer.
Mm. Well, that's good. That's not a bad way to be occupied. You
Yeah,
mentioned
I
going to
mean,
shows. Yeah. Uh-huh. So go ahead.
like when I did the Trouble in the Camera Club, like I was not in a band that was touring or active, and I just
Right.
had that itch to tour. And so it was just like, okay, I'm going to take a photo show on the road.
Right.
So, you just have to make it happen if you want it to happen.
Do you still take your camera to shows?
Not really,
Okay.
for a bunch of different reasons. Bigger shows, they're strict with cameras, and
Right.
you often don't know the policy until you get there. Depending, like, a lot of
Hmm.
medium-sized clubs, even, it's like you arrive and find out that um, they're not allowing cameras in. Also, there are so many people taking photos
Yeah.
that kind of my
I get it.
drive to take photos doesn't exist anymore because the next day I'm going to see a million great photos of the show I was at the night before on Instagram.
Hmm.
Um, I really like taking pictures, but I think I really notice that I tend to take like portraits a lot. Even when I was taking band pictures, they often look like portraits, but I kind of like the band on stage. There's photographers whose work that I love, but I get sort of tired of like the shot of the person in the air. Like
Right.
it's like it's like 1,000 times I'm going to look at that and say, "Fuck, that's a great shot," and 1,000 different pictures of the exact same thing. So I'm kind of aware of
Well, exactly.
what the
Yeah.
forms are, what the formulas are.
Hmm. Hmm. I don't know if you saw, but your old friends in Girl Trouble just announced that they're putting out Another
A
album?
new album.
A new album.
Yeah, yeah. I've listened to their first single off of it a few times.
Yes.
Good for them.
Um,
I have so much
so,
love and respect for them.
and I know you've said quite understandably that there won't be another Shadowy Men, that the band is done. But is there any circumstance under which you would entertain, reviving it in some way, shape, or form, even if it were just to? I think you said that there are some unreleased songs that you recorded with Dallas that are on a
We
tape
didn't
somewhere.
record them. No, we didn't get to record them.
Okay.
That we were writing and that we were playing.
Mm,
Um, it would, it's hard to imagine who else it would be. Like
mm,
our sort of second life only happened because it was Dallas.
mm,
And it only lasted as long as it did because it was Dallas. And and it was uh, hugely about just socially how we
right.
connected, just like our love for each other as people. And I don't think there's another person in Brian and my life
Right.
who both of us connect to that would make that thing really special because it's not like, we have to keep the band going at any cost. There's there's none of that. Like
Mm-hmm.
it was just like, well, we're still going because this is amazing. That's how it was with Dallas, and it's hard to imagine that
Right.
being the case with anybody
Right.
else. Like, I've thought about it, and we've been asked to play at things, where someone says, "Oh, I'm a bass player. I'll learn the songs and I'll fill in."
Mm-hmm.
It's like, no, it doesn't work that way.
Mm. Well,
First of
good for
all,
you. That it takes, it's good to know when it's time. Because
yeah,
you go to a lot of shows and you see some people out there. I remember seeing, and not that this is a direct comparison in terms of anything, but I remember going to see BB King several
yeah,
years ago, just before the end, and it,
yeah,
it was clear that they were just he had no other sort of life. I mean, if they had taken him off the road, if he had stopped touring, he probably would have just, withered away and died in a week.
yeah,
So, but he was out there playing shows that he was clearly, it was like some of those latter day Tony Bennett appearances where, the cognitive abilities were going and,
yeah,
it was just kind of, I felt sad for the guy in a
yeah.
way. And again, not that that's, not that you're in any way, shape, or form in those
No,
shoes yet.
I appreciate that people are still out there, but
Yeah,
and I also understand that there are a lot of people that just like need to keep doing this because
that's who they
financially,
are.
it's like,
Yeah.
uh, but yeah, I've definitely seen a few people who should not be out on the road anymore, or you know, like last time I saw Roxy Music, it's like, okay, we're saying goodbye because
Yeah.
Brian Ferry can't sing anymore. It's
Right.
sort of like
Yeah.
he
Yeah. I
doesn't
mean, the
even
same
sing on
same
his
is true of
latest album.
McCartney. Where McCartney's voice is kind of shot, and he can still play the songs, and he's still Paul McCartney, but
Yeah.
you know, oh well. So Mister A Million Projects on the Go. Aside from spending your summer touring this book, what else have you got? Some other irons in the fire? Things you've got happening, working
Well,
towards?
Long Branch is we're working on another record. We're
Oh wow.
kind of putting that together now. So there's that. I'm going to be doing a score for a film for Rick Mead, an artist who I've done a number of films with.
Hmm.
So I'm working on that. I'm doing working on some mixing for a band Cut Flowers. It's a band with Kevin Byrne and Al Okada, who are in
Right.
King Cobb Steelie.
Right. I know the name. I haven't
Um,
heard them. Yeah.
and those are kind of the things that are on my plate at the moment.
Pretty good.
The future, I'm going to be going out to do some talks about the book, and kind of banging the drum about that thing a little bit. And who knows
Yeah, well, good for
after
you,
that?
man. It's you haven't lost the enthusiasm and the love and the which is great.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely still have like a million things. Like, learned I learned video editing specifically to make a video for Long Branch, the first video that we did. But then, I kind of like fell off of.
Right.
I didn't keep it up, so that's my other summer project is to learn how to edit video again.
Excellent. All right. Well, listen, man, I could talk to you all day long. I have like a huge list of questions that we didn't even get to, but I'm going to let you get on with the rest of your day because I know you got other things to do. But I want to say thank you for the book. Sincerely, loved
Thank
it.
you. I really appreciate it. You're the first
Yeah.
person I've talked to about it. So
Oh,
I was
okay.
kind of nervous, like in anticipation, like, oh God, I was like, because I don't have, a set of prepared answers, and it's all kind of like, what am I going to say?
Nah. Now, again, I think this will be an easy one to sell to anybody, any Canadian who grew up, of a certain age. I mean, I don't know. Do
Yeah.
the kids still listen to Shadowy Men? Do you still get any kind of, you know?
Well, I like this week, I can't really tell you, but when we were still doing it with Dallas, it was like
Yeah.
a huge part of the audience was younger people.
Yeah,
And
so then there you go. So you got that, and you got that Dallas factor in there. Again, I think there's no trouble. You'll have no trouble connecting with people and talking about it. There's so much, like I said, there's so much to talk about in this book. So,
well, thank you. I really appreciate that.
and I hope you
And
make it out to
thank
Western Canada for some of these readings.
Yeah, yeah. I'm wanting to go as wherever I can, kind of as far as I can, and then set up a bunch of things, but then going as far as the West Coast, the financial constraints of that, because it's not like anyone's, paying me to
Oh,
come out there. But, if you know a library that has a budget for presenting author talks or anything like that.
they're moving our library to a store in the nearest mall.
In the mall.
Yeah,
Wow.
they're going to shut down the library because it's a building they can then sell, right?
That's
So they're going to rent
unfortunate.
a store in a mall in perpetuity and spend money instead of, I don't know. That's the way of the
Oh
world,
boy.
right? Yeah.
Yep.
Anyway, thanks for
Nothing
your
is getting
time.
better.
Well, some ways it is, some ways it isn't. Listen, thanks for your time, and hope to see you at a gig somewhere in Toronto someday.
All right. Thanks a lot.
All
See
right,
you later.
cheers.